Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, we're Mackie and Amanda. I'm Mackie. And we're the Spooky Boos. So in today's video, we're doing this a little bit differently because unfortunately, I got COVID. This is like day 10 and I'm still positive, so this is getting a little out of hand. But anyway, we decided, since we couldn't film or anything, that we were going to do this remote video. And we're going to be telling you guys true scary stories that we have found on Reddit. They are truly terrifying, and the fact that people really experience this is even scarier. So grab some popcorn, turn off the lights, and let's get into some scary stories. But before we do, here's a quick word from today's video sponsor. So we actually just got back from filming this video, but before we go any further, we want to share with you today's sponsor, Beam.
We want to tell you a little bit about our after filming routine. Right now it's almost 12 and everyone else in the house is asleep. We're next.
Beam Dream Powder is extremely beneficial if you're someone who has trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, and especially us when we get back from filming these videos, we're so wound up.
Beam is amazing because you will not only fall asleep and stay asleep, but you will wake up feeling refreshed with no grogginess.
And on top of that, it tastes amazing too.
Only 15 calories. Beam Dream is super easy to use. You just have to pour 1 to 2 scoops into a mug of hot water or milk and blend until cozy. Sip 30 to 45 minutes before bed and enjoy your deepest night's sleep.
Beam comes in some amazing flavors such as cinnamon cacao
and chocolate peanut butter.
I love that Dream has high quality sleep ingredients that leave me with zero grogginess the next day. In a clinical study, 93% of participants reported Dream helped them get a better night's sleep and wake up feeling more refreshed. Click the link below or scan the QR code and use code Mackie and Amanda to get up to 35% off.
So if you're having trouble falling asleep like us, ghosts or not ghosts related, definitely try Beam Dream Powder.
So thank you again, Beam, for sponsoring this video, and without further ado, enjoy our video. Now let's get into the scary stories. Okay, story number 1. This one was written 10 years ago, and the user is AIGRET. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it reads, when I was in high school, I had a really good friend who lived next door to a house that was always up for sale. People would move out in the middle of the night without a word. It hadn't had the same owner for more than 6 months straight for a couple of years. One night, we were really bored and he suggested we go explore the house next door since it had sat empty for a while. We go around back and there's a dog door that he can crawl through, and he unlocks the door and lets me in. The house itself is really unremarkable. It looked like it was built in maybe the 1950s and it was a craftsman style house in an older, nicer part of town. My friend's house was similarly built. The kitchen had a really nice built-in breakfast table set against a picture window. The house's electricity was off, but you could see the street light through the window. My friend and I sit down on the floor across from this table and we're just hanging out talking. Why? Who knows? All of a sudden, my friend screams, and in that instant, my vision goes black. But it wasn't that I just couldn't see. My body was engulfed in a sickly coldness from head to toe. I start screaming and I feel my friend's hand grabbing mine and pulling me in some direction forcefully. My vision slowly comes back and I start to warm up when I realize that we're outside under the streetlight. It was December and should have been much warmer inside of that house. Finally, I looked at my friend and he looked scared. I'm really confused and kind of panicked myself, and I finally asked him what happened. He says that as I was talking, a black thing, this figure that was all black and only had the vague shape of a girl, crawled out from under the table and sat on top of me. Apparently I started groping around with my eyes wide open, like I couldn't see, and he was so freaked out he pulled me out of the house. We're still friends and we bring it up every now and then, but the story itself never changes and it still sends chills down my spine. To this day, I've never felt such black or coldness in my life. It was palpable, almost sticky. For a couple of days afterwards, I couldn't shake this unsettling feeling and I could never walk past that house again. Ugh. I'm scared to get out of bed now. I'm scared in general. I'm in the haunted garage by myself late at night with all the lights off besides this ring light. And people may think, oh, you have such a bright light in there, you can see everything. That is completely wrong. If you have a ring light on at night, you can't see anything around it. I can't see the corners, I can't see behind it, I can't see over here. It's like you're in this little light bubble, but other than that, you're in the dark. Alright, this one was posted 2 years ago by Vic Pez. Growing up, I lived in 2 houses. I'll call the first house, the one which I lived in for all of elementary school and some of middle school, House A. I'll call the second house where my family lived in the rest of middle school years, all of my high school years, and all of my college years, House B. Interestingly, House B was less than a mile away from House A. It's on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. But, in retrospect, I love living there. It was quiet, secluded, and there were 40 acres of woods and swamp to explore. My understanding is that House B was my dad's dream house growing up. I always attributed our decision to move there to my dad's love of the place. When the woman who owned House B died, her family wanted to make sure the house went to somebody local who would appreciate it. Enter my dad. Over the years, though, I started to wonder whether my parents had other reasons for moving out of House A. I'm not going to lie, the place was a little bit creepy. I'm not going to say it's haunted because I've never seen anything in real life that's made me believe in hauntings. Also, nobody ever died in House A, to our knowledge. But I'm certainly not going to say that House A wasn't haunted. There were a handful of weird things that happened to other members of my family in House A. Before I was born, my mom and dad, sleeping in the bedroom that eventually became mine, woke up one morning and happened to look in the closet. As they watched, a dollar bill drifted down from the ceiling and floated gently to the floor. Once while I was at school, my mom was hanging laundry on the clotheslines in the yard while watching my sister. She got the strangest feeling that somebody was looking at her. She looked up at the window of the second floor of the house, which overlooked the yard, and although she didn't see anything, she could swear that something was looking at her from a specific window. As aside from the rest of my story, my little sister was always creepy in her younger years. She once pointed at the corner of the living room and asked, "Who is that old lady?" There was no lady, at least none that we could see. When I was in elementary school, my family was sitting around eating dinner. My sister out of nowhere said, "Vic Pez will die at the age of 10. With Mom." My dad and I paid no attention to this, but this really stuck with my mom. She spent the entirety of my 10th year freaking out that something was going to happen that would kill us both. She worried whenever she drove me to and from school, she was such a bad driver that she was going to get us both killed. There was actually one time when we were driving during a bad winter storm and she convinced that we were going to bite it. But obviously we didn't because I'm here to tell the story today. In the end, our little creepy prophetess of doom turned out to be incorrect. Most of the weird things happened to me though. I'll start with the dreams. I had one dream where my cousins came to visit and they left at the end of the day as the sun was setting. As we stood in the yard waving goodbye, I started floating upward uncontrollably. Then the dream ended. I had a similar dream in which my parents and their friends were sitting around in the kitchen having some beers and catching up. I went into my bedroom where I saw a villain from a kid's TV show floating in the corner of my room up towards the ceiling. I started floating up toward her. Now I'm not saying that it was aliens, I'm just saying it was weird. Dreams don't mean much though, they're just dreams. Nothing concrete there and nothing outside the experience of one boring little kid. There was one time though when I woke up, not in my room. I was standing in front of the door of my house, with only the screen door separating me from the front porch. Don't know how I got there. That was weird. I went back to bed and thought nothing of it. A year or so later, my dad was remodeling the hallway that connected to my bedroom, my sister's bedroom, the living room, and the stairs up to the second floor of the house. He left his equipment in the hallway for the night. That night, I walked out my bedroom while my mom was watching TV in the living room. "What are you doing, Vic Pez?" I didn't answer. She asked again, and when I was silent, she figured I was sleepwalking. Then, I fell down, right next to my dad's saw. Luckily, I got back up and fell again. At this point, my mom hurried over and guided me back to bed. I have to say that upstairs of the house was always weirding me out. I was up there a lot. It's where I kept my Sega Genesis, my PlayStation, and the last year or so living there, our computer. But something about that floor gave me creeps. You know that tingly feeling in the back of your neck that you get when it feels like somebody's watching you? If I was ever up there after dark, I got that feeling. Weirder though was the feeling I got regardless of what time of day it was when I was going down the stairs. There was a brief chill and a certainty that there was something behind me that wanted to push me. I took those stairs at a dead run whenever I got that feeling. By that time though, I was old enough to know just how childish all this sounded and kept it firmly to myself. At the beginning of 7th grade, my family moved into House B and the creepiness stopped. At least it stopped for me. Years passed. I came home from college one summer. This was a year before my parents got divorced, when my family was still living in House B. My mom, my grandma, my sister, and myself were standing around the kitchen trading stories. Eventually, the topic of conversation turned spooky, and eventually the topic of conversation turned to House A. This is how I eventually learned the stories I related above. At least the ones that didn't happen to me. Since we were all being creepy, I decided to tell my mother just how creepy the upstairs was to me. She seemed surprised, but agreed that it was not a pleasant place. Sometimes, she said, when I was going down the stairs, I interrupted her before she could finish. You felt like somebody was going to push you? Neither of us had ever shared that story before. Alright, this next story is from Chugga Chugga Juju. I had a friend when I was around 8 that I would always hang out with. She drove me up the wall because if we were in different rooms and I called out to her, she'd never answer. She would just walk into the room and then respond. I hated it because it would scare me when she'd silently pop up out of nowhere when I called out to her. Her whole family was like this too. I thought it was just a politeness thing because one of the aunts would always yell at me for shouting, "What?" But my aunt was only angry that I never said yes. So yeah, I thought my friend and her family were just weird. I asked my friend why she could never just simply answer me when I yelled for her. She'd always just shrug and say there's no real reason and that's just how she rolls. I pointed out that her parents and siblings were the same way and she said they roll like that too. Okay, fine. Well, one day I was over there and her dad was at work and her stay-at-home mom went to take one of her younger brothers to hockey practice and the younger one to the doctor's office. She left us home because she didn't feel like carting around a bunch of kids and she knew we wouldn't tear the house apart like the boys would. An hour after she left, my friend and I were upstairs together doing craft shit when I heard someone downstairs call her name. It happened twice and she didn't notice. I told her what I heard and we listened. After a while, we heard the voice faintly call to her. It sounded like it was coming from the garage. I was like, "Oh, your mom's back. Ask her what she wants." My friend just quietly got up and walked all the way downstairs instead of yelling back. I followed her but was pissed. Like, why are you walking all this way when simply yelling back would get all the answers we need? We go into the garage and there's no one there. We check the entire first floor and nothing. Doors and windows all closed and locked. I'm a bit weirded out, and my friend nonchalantly grabs some ice cream from the fridge and we go sit outside on the doorstep and eat it. I ask her, what the f was that about? And she's like, yeah, so you asked me why we don't answer anyone calling from other rooms or outside, and this is why. She explained that in her culture, they believe that demons use the voices of your loved ones to try to lure you to hell or something. She said you're safe if you don't answer them, which is why her I just heard something. Which is why her family would always come into the room to verify the person calling them was actually a person. Now I'm freaked out and don't want to go back inside at all until her mom would return. My friend was pretty unaffected by it all, and she said she's used to it. In my panic, I asked if the demons ever shapeshifted so that even if you see your loved one who called you, it really wasn't them. She got quiet and thought about that, then got scared and started crying. She said she never thought about that before. We both ran out of our friend's house and down the road and stayed there. That one really freaks me out because both me and Amanda have had experiences like that, and we've talked about that a lot recently, about hearing someone's voice calling you or saying your name and no one actually being there. So that one is a bit weird. This next story comes from Broom Power. I live in Vermont, pretty close to the Canadian border, and my family owns a good chunk of mountain behind our house. I've always loved hiking up our mountain and camping out, but after several instances of being far too close for comfort with coyotes and bears at night, I decided to build a small shack for camping in. I built it in my freshman year of high school, and it was certainly nothing to write home about. It was basically a log cabin made from only moose maple, which sick for building with, and completely encased in roofing to prevent rain from blowing through the cracks between logs. That's the backstory. Anyways, I'll start with the story. I asked one of my closest friends to go on a camp out on a Friday night after school. We'd been friends since middle school, so he had been up there multiple times before. After hiking up and roasting some hot dogs on a fire while listening to some chill music, it was dark. Whenever it gets dark on these campouts, you can always hear wildlife, I thought, running around the woods surrounding the fire. I always thought it was creepy, but after a long time with no bad encounters with wildlife, I felt pretty okay with the situation every night I was up there. And Anyways, after having our fill, we decided to go into camp and get some sleep. In the camp, 10 by 12 foot, one homemade bunk bed, some floor space, and a countertop, and a small wood cook stove. I took top bunk and my friend took bottom. We both fell asleep pretty quickly, but awoke simultaneously at what I would guess was around 1 a.m. to the sound of a church choir right outside the camp. It sounded like 30 to 40 people singing, and it was resonating inside my head. I could distinctly make out some Latin words, but I could never piece together what was being said. I turned down to my friend and asked if his phone was on. He said it was dead. The creepiest part about this, after reflecting on it, is that we were perfectly calm. If anything, it was super soothing, and eventually we both fell asleep. In the morning, we both checked around the camp and saw no signs of anyone, let alone 40 people. We were 10 miles away from a town. To this day, I have no clue what happened, but I commonly refer to this singing as the angels because of how angelic it sounded. I think about it all the time, but it hasn't happened to me again since. I'm just glad I have someone to corroborate the story with, or else people would think I'm insane. That's crazy, because I've had a couple experiences where I woke up in the middle of the night and like saw something standing there. One of them, I've told this story before, but I was super sick at the time. My Crohn's was flaring really bad. I'd been literally in bed for like 6 months. Like it was bad and it wasn't getting better. And I'd just gotten out of the hospital, and the night I got out of the hospital, I guess my mom was like praying to her mom, or like talking to her, because she passed away when my mom was 16. So she was just talking to her saying, give me a sign that Mackie's gonna be okay. Like, just give me a sign that everything's gonna be all right and she's gonna get better. She never told me this. That night I go to sleep and I wake up in the middle of the night to this lady standing. Okay, so I would have been laying right here like this, and there's a gap about this big in between my bed and the wall. And I open my eyes and I see this lady standing right next to me, just looking down at me like this, with her hair drooping just how mine is. And she was wearing a gray crew neck sweatshirt. Oh my god.
Are you there?
Yeah. She was wearing a gray crew neck sweatshirt and gray sweatpants. And I remember opening my eyes and looking at her, and I was just staring. And I'm like, okay, who's this lady? And I'm like, maybe I'm just gonna close my eyes now. I closed my eyes again. 10 seconds later, I had to open them again. So I opened them. She's still standing there. So I stare at her for probably 20 more seconds. Her hair was about this long, a little bit wavy. And so I'm just staring at her, and I was like, all right. And I rolled over on my other side and faced the other direction and went back to sleep. And I just remember being super calm in the moment, feeling very relaxed and at ease and almost like peaceful feeling. And so I wake up in the morning, and the second I wake up, I remember what had happened, and I instantly freak out. I'm like, what the hell was that last night? Why didn't I freak out? Why wasn't I scared? Who is this lady? And I was just freaked out. And at that moment, my mom happened to be walking past my door, so I was like, wait, come in here. And she came in, and I'm like, were you standing next to me last night? And she's like, no, why? And I told her what happened. I described this lady I saw, and she said, oh my gosh, that literally sounds like my mom. I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah, every night she wore the same gray sweatsuit to bed, and that just sounds like her. So she went and got a picture of her to show me, because like I said, she died when my mom was 16, and I've seen pictures here and there over the years, but it's like the type of thing I'd see the picture and be like, okay, cool, but I wouldn't, like, I didn't have a clear picture of what her mom looked like in my head. And so she went and got a picture of her and brought it back in, and the second I saw the picture of her, I'm like, that was her. I swear on everything, identical. Like, I know for a fact that was her. And my mom started to get emotional, and she's like, there's no way. Last night I literally was talking to my mom, telling me to give me a sign, and then that happened. And I'm like, this is the craziest thing ever. And so it just, I don't know, I'll remember it so clear, it's so vividly for the rest of my life, only because of the calm feeling. And every time I tell this story to people, I've just always tried to like get across just how calm I felt, and it was the weirdest thing. So like the fact that this story was talking about that calm, angelic feeling. I 100% know what they're talking about, and I understand. And in the moment, you just can't explain it. And looking back on it, it's the weirdest thing. So sorry I went off on that tangent, but I just wanted to share that. Anyway, that's a good story. I like it. Okay, this one's creepy. This is 10 years ago. This is from Canadian. Canadian? I don't know. Late to the show, but last December, a little before Christmas, my friend and I were driving home after our final exam. There's a red light at the major intersection up ahead, and I begin to slow down. I came to a complete stop in the right/sidewalk lane of a 4-lane street, 2 each direction, facing southbound with 6 cars in front of me, and I'm stopped with a side street to my right. Suddenly, I hear tires screeching and a crash. I got hit rear right of my car by another driver. We get out, exchange information, and begin to take pictures of our respective vehicles. I look up the street to make sure I have a few hundred meters between myself and any vehicles approaching from the north before I step into the left southbound lane so I can get a picture showing the angle of both our cars and the street signs, which are rear, right, northwest intersection of the side street. I don't know what... If someone was like, I'll give you $1 million to point in the right direction of northwest, I wouldn't be able to do it. I don't know how this person is. My friend calls me over to unlock the trunk so he can get paper from his pack to write down his witness statement, and just as I step back into the right lane, my car occupies northbound driver, who is so occupied with observing our collision, drifts into the left southbound lane, which I just stood in, and missed me by about a foot. He was traveling probably 70 km/h, kilometers an hour. That's about 43 miles per hour. 2 days later, I go paintballing with a aforementioned friend and a few others. In between games, you go into the lobby with your mask off, and everyone is supposed to put their paintball marker gun on a safe and have a barrel cover over the muzzle. I'm leaning against a wall in the lobby when previous friend asks if he can borrow money to buy more paint. My back is still leaning against the wall, but I lean to the right to hand him my wallet. As I put it in his hand, I hear a loud splat against the wall I'm on. I look and find a paintball fired at where my head/eyes should have been had I not moved. Somehow one of the kids across the room was putting his marker down on a table, and the barrel cover's retention bungee snapped, allowing the cover to fall off. The safety broke and the marker fired around. A paintball to the eye at 250 FPS could have been a game changer, to say the least. 2 days later, I'm out drinking with friends I went paintball with and some others. We're walking down a major street, and I'm naturally a fast walker, so every 25 meters I'm stopping, turning back, and waiting for everyone to catch up. That's the story of my life. At one point, I look back and see everyone is still pretty far back, but it's cold and we're practically at our destination, so instead of stopping to wait, I decide to keep walking ahead. Then, for some reason, I decide to stop and shout back to them, I'll meet you inside. Just as I do so, I hear a loud engine roaring up the street and turn to see a speeding Porsche 10 meters in front of me hit the west wall of a building literally at a right angle so hard that more than half of his engine compartment caved in, his airbags deployed, and the windows all shattered. Had I kept walking without saying anything to my friends, I probably would have been between the car and the building. 2 days later, it's Boxing Day morning. I was in and out a few times throughout the night because I was excited to go pick up some items with my friend, the same one from the collision paintball night out. At one point through the night, I have a nightmare of all sorts. The earliest part of the dream I remember is me leaping out a panel door van with a rope in my hand. I have no idea, but in the dream, my mind knows that someone's trying to kill me. As my feet hit the ground, I find myself in the driveway. I run inside the house and for some reason tie the rope to the front doorknob, knowing that on the other end of the rope, the killer is tied to it. I lock and barricade the doors and windows to the house and call 911. The operator tells me every officer is busy with something and no one can come help me. I hang up the phone and I'm about to call someone else when I notice the rope has been cut. Trying to stay silent and listen for the killer, I suddenly notice everything that can possibly make sounds in the house is giving. Kettle, stove fan, toilet, shower, TV, radio, everything. I look up at the top of the stairs and see someone's foot hit the first step and start walking downstairs. I wake up screaming and sweating, and the first words out of my mouth before I can even think to process it as a dream are, Slenderman. And they put a brief description of the entire story, and it says, almost died 3 times in real life and how to dream Slenderman was trying to kill me in 1 week. That's a pretty scary Slenderman story, I'll say that much. This one is again 10 years ago. We were living at my grandparents' at the time, and my aunt's room was a 2-foot-tall Victorian-style doll converted into a lamp. The lamp would only turn on by holding the doll's cold plastic hand, raising and lowering the arm. The doll stood on a nightstand next to my aunt's bed, facing the door, greeting everyone who entered with a creepy, dead-eye smile. I was alone in the house one day and wanted a blanket from my aunt's closet. Luckily for this scaredy cat, there were 2 important factors that worked in my favor. 1, it was the mid-afternoon and wouldn't need the lamp's light. And 2, the closet was located immediately next to the door's entrance. So without lifting my gaze, I stared at the floor, entered the room, and turned 180 degrees. Now my back was towards the doll. I quickly swung open the closet door and reached down for a blanket when suddenly something about the room was different. Brighter, the light was on. The peach fuzz hairs on the back of my neck uncurled. I froze for an eternity and felt my survival instinct kick in and wanted to run screaming in horror. But before all that, I still had to look. Man, I wish I hadn't looked. As I turned to exit the room, I lifted my stupid head, only to confirm that the doll's hand was raised and that it was pointed directly at me. Such traumatizing vision burned in my brain since I was 13. Much uneasy, creepy memory. That's why dolls suck, honestly. I agree with Clutchy, who left a comment that reads, "Who the fuck makes a lamp like that? Why? Just why the fuck?" I get it, Clutchy. We got one more to end it off on. This is by Jersey Hard, 10 years ago. So my uncle used to work a lot when I was younger. He's done a lot of different things to make money, but one consistent thing that in the summer months and into the late fall, he paints houses. It's a legitimate business and everything. He got a truck with a number and a name and supplies in the back. The works. Every now and then he would call my... Sorry. Okay. Every now and then he would call my dad when he needed a little extra help and I'd work for him. No big deal, really. It's just painting and I'd work for him. No, no big deal, really. It's just painting houses. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it takes a while to paint a whole house. If the weather conditions aren't right, then you can't paint. One particular fall was extremely wet. It rained what felt like every single day. My uncle would paint multiple houses at a time, so sometimes he would get caught up due to situations like these, and I'd work a little more than usual. That was fine by me, though. The job wasn't hard, and it paid well. Anyway, it was a warm day for late fall, but there was still a distinct chill in the air. One that kind of penetrated through you and stung your soul. My uncle had this job, he had to finish it. It was an old Victorian... I don't know why the f*** I'm talking like that. It was an old Victorian house in a quiet part of town. A lady and her husband, who was an author, lived there. Due to the weather, it had taken longer than expected to paint the house, and there were family issues going on at the time, which further complicated things. So my uncle gets a call one day from the lady who lives at the house. She says that her husband is trying to write his next book, but he keeps getting distracted by the scaffolding outside the house. So she wanted to know if we could come over and finish the job ASAP. My uncle was always an honest businessman. They had contracted him to do the job in midsummer, but he had lots of jobs that summer, and the wet conditions I mentioned above made it difficult to finish anything. However, these people were insistent but really polite, and not wanting to lose customers or give bad recommendation, my uncle decided to put the house as a high priority. After all, it would only take a day or two to finish. So we show up to this house mid-afternoon. Like I said, it was a weird, kind of chilly that day, and I also remember a really eerie calm. The day was slightly overcast, so everything was shrouded in gray, and it was the perfect setting for a mystery crime novel. So we arrive at the house, and my uncle and I moved to the back. The front of the house was already done, so there was nothing left there. My uncle, being the more experienced painter, would always do the touch-ups, and I would simply apply the first coats since they took a little skill. Anyway, we get to the back of the house and he asked me if I'm scared of heights. I was 17 at the time, and although they do creep me out a little, I didn't want to seem like a child in front of my uncle, so I told him I wasn't. He was happy to hear that. He has me climb up the scaffold to the 3rd floor to finish the upper section of the house. There's a window up there, a small little oval one that looked into the attic. The attic also happened to be the husband's study. He would do most of his writing in there. Okay, I'm gonna warn everyone, it gets a little graphic here and might be triggering for some people. So, it talks about death in a specific way. So I'm climbing up the scaffolding, cans of paint dangling behind me, and various paintbrushes and other tools in the utility belt my uncle let me borrow. I get to the top of the scaffolding and set all my supplies down. I crack open a can of paint, start painting like I had a few hundred times before. Outside of the temperature, the overcast, and the eerie calm, this day was like any other. I'm working my way across the top part of the house when I get to the window that looks into the study. I bend down, dip my paintbrush, and stand back up to paint above the window. The window is in my direct line of sight, and I couldn't help gazing in. I see a man, the husband, staring back at me with a face completely barren of any emotion. I'd never seen a face so devoid of feeling before. I still haven't. Of course, I get startled and take a step back. I chuckle and smile at the guy, but he doesn't smile back. Instead, while remaining completely emotionless, he draws a pistol up to his head that he was holding in his hand the whole time and proceeds to blow his brains out without ever breaking eye contact right in front of me while I'm staring at him. And under shock, I gasped and let out the smallest scream as I stepped back in fear. Only I stepped back a step too much and fell off the scaffolding. Alerted by the gunshot, my uncle looked up in just enough time to see me fall off the scaffolding from the 3rd story. I was lucky enough to land in a bush and only suffer a broken ankle and a few scratches. The biggest wounds happened in my head. I had to go to counseling for a while. It's been years since then. I still remember that man's face. I've never forgotten it. It'll always be burned in the back of my head. I know why, looking back, his face was so devoid of any emotion, because he never felt any emotion at all. He literally didn't care about what he was doing. As it turns out, the man was seriously depressed and facing marital issues with his wife. Combined with a few too many nights drunk on whiskey and facing writer's block, I guess he decided he couldn't take it anymore. His wife moved out of the house shortly after, and we never finished the job. To this day, that house remains abandoned, and to this day, I try not to drive down the street it's on. I'm scared that if I do and happen to pass the backyard, I'll see the man staring back at me from the window, cold and emotionless. That story is very sad and very scary, especially for the guy, the 17-year-old who's painting the house. That's something that just changes your life forever. So I feel bad for everyone involved in that situation, but that is truly terrifying. On that note, I'm going to wrap up the video there. I hope you guys did enjoy these scary stories. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel because, like we said before, we do have some crazy locations planned out and we're going to get into them very soon, but we got to get healthy first, so we should have investigations next week, so just stay tuned for that. And thank you everyone for sticking it out with us. But anyway, once again, thank you guys so much for watching and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.